Just hold it like, we're on. Oh.
solidarity and unity to spread the message that said that enough is enough and that Black Lives Matter. What an amazing outpouring of support. My name is Karen, yes, an unfortunate name in this time. My name is Karen Shin, and I am one of the organizers of this event. And I've been living here in Millbrae for over 10 years with my husband and my 2 boys. Before we get started, I want to remind people to keep their masks on and to socially distance. If you lost your mask during the march, feel free to raise your hand. We have some extras up here. Gina Pappin, sitting up here, has got some extras for you. And I also wanted to thank the people for making today happen. So I want to thank our city manager, Tom Williams, and all of our city council members for their support. And I also want to thank the Millbrae neighbors who helped organize this event. There were over a couple of dozen people, and if you helped organize this event, please wave your hands because there were a good number of people here. This is a real good effort, and I'm super proud of this community coming together out of nowhere to put this together today. And most importantly, we want to thank all of you for marching today and sharing in our humanity to say that Black Lives Matter. No justice, no peace. So we have a few words from Millbrae residents before we kneel for justice and to honor the victims of police brutality, including George Floyd. And to start us off, please welcome our mayor in Millbrae, Ruben Holler.
Welcome everyone, and thank you, Karen, and to everyone who helped organize this event. The murder of George Floyd on May 25th suffocated to death. The murder of George Floyd on May 25th suffocated to death by the knee of a man who had sworn an oath to protect and serve, shocked our country, and unleashed a tide of peaceful protests that have spanned the globe. It was one of the most egregious acts of police brutality caught on camera in recent memory. We know that this action was not representative of the vast majority of brave men and women in law enforcement who risked their lives to protect our communities. But it was not an isolated event. Many in the Black community were not surprised by the footage. For far too long, African Americans have had different experiences with policing that those from other backgrounds could not comprehend. But these protests are not only about policing. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But nearly 6 decades after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, racism is still a stain on our national soul. We saw that with the neo-Nazis and KKK marching with their tiki torches in Charlottesville. We saw that with the lynching of Ahmaud Arbery on his jog by white supremacists in Georgia. We saw that when a Black man couldn't even go bird watching in Central Park without being harassed on the basis of his race. Here in Millbrae, we pride ourselves on being a welcoming and diverse community. Yet, we are not immune from racism. Racist comments percolate on social media. Asian residents have endured xenophobic remarks throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Racist, obscene graffiti and a swastika were recently spray painted at Taylor Middle School. As someone who grew up here and cares deeply about this community, I am saddened by these events. In November 2019, the Millbrae City Council joined the United Against Hate movement, reaffirming our commitment to stand against racism, bigotry, and intolerance. Today, I would like to propose to the Council that we consider a zero-tolerance policy against racist acts or remarks made by city employees, commissioners, and committee members. That behavior has no place in our community. As we conclude this event, let us remember George Floyd and not let his death be in vain. Let us use his memory as a positive force of change in all of us. Let us have these difficult, perhaps uncomfortable discussions about systemic racism and police use of force policy. Let us work to build a deeper trust and accountability in law enforcement and strive to guarantee everyone equal protection of constitutional and human rights. Together, we can make steps to bridge our divides and heal our country. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Henderson. I'm 17. I've lived in Millbrae my whole life. I'm mixed. My mother is white, my father is black. Having been raised in a household where my mom and dad don't look the same, I've never seen a problem with looking or being different. I don't have a lot of experience with discrimination because my name is John and I have blue eyes. But one thing has always bothered me. When I got to high school, I heard the N-word tossed around like it didn't mean anything, because it was in songs. The word itself is wrong, and I believe no one should use it. But I knew for a fact that it was more wrong coming out of a white kid's mouth, an Asian kid's mouth, a Latino kid's mouth, anyone who isn't black. I knew it dishonored every single one of my ancestors who was whipped, burned, and sliced to pieces by slave owners who spat that word out like a curse. So I stood up to it. I told people to stop, said things like, I don't care who gave it to you. I say there's no such thing as an N-word pass. But nobody stopped. They would just pause. And I'd hear them saying it in the hallway again the next day. It just went right back to doing it. And that wore me down. It broke my resolve to stand up for my heritage. Because I felt as if I stood alone against a mountain of adversaries. After a while, I determined it wasn't worth it to fight the N-word. I let myself accept the hate in that single word under the excuse that high schoolers are ignorant, and I can't stop them from saying hurtful things. I accepted that that was the truth of the world that I live in. And I was wrong for accepting that. Even though I couldn't stop them, I should have kept trying, because I, a person with black heritage, didn't fight, then no one would. The death of George Floyd taught me that I can't trust the people that are supposed to uphold the law. I can't trust people to do what's right. I can't trust law enforcement to stand up for what's right. The only person I can trust to do what's right is myself. The only person you, all of you can trust to do what's right is yourself. No one else is going to do it for us. A world where some people can say the N-word without guilt is the world we live in. But it's not the world I want to live in. And if you support this movement, it's not the world you should want to live in either. I want to live in a world where black people aren't crushed and killed under the knee of the law, where we're not passed up for jobs because of our names, where we are truly equal. This is Martin Luther King's dream. He once said, "In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." We have to be the people in the world we want to live in, not the one we live in now. Be active. When you hear the N-word out of someone's ignorant mouth, tell them not to say it. Be active. You see a black man walking in your neighborhood, don't call the cops. And if you see him pinned down by cops, demand to know what is going on as a citizen and see to it that they are making lawful choices. Be active. Choose to be active and be the people in the world that we all want to live in. Be how I used to be, how I'm choosing to be now, instead of the cowardly boy who I was that chose not to fight because I thought my punches didn't leave marks, and because no one else would. Act like Black Lives Matter. Together, we can change the world. Frankly, I shouldn't have to thank you because these things should already be done, but all people should be treated like people. But thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Steinberg, and it is a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I take high school and middle school students from our community, this community, into the Deep South, retracing the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s on a program called Sojourn to the Past. And the lessons we learn on our travels are about institutionalized racism, the destructiveness of language, personal courage, not to be silent to injustice, what we call a silent witness, and the power of nonviolence. I grew up in this community. I went to grammar school in Millbrae. I went to Taylor Middle School. I went to high school here. I've lived in this community over 50 years. I graduated high school in 1980. Now, I am a member of this community, and I live in Millbrae now, and I've chosen to raise my family in Millbrae. I also want to reach out as an ally to our Asian community today, and specifically our Chinese community, who has borne the brunt of too much undeserved racism. And I want them to know, I want to share with them, I stand proudly with them today. And this message I'm about to deliver is about all of us, what Dr. King called the beloved community. When Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, it was said at his funeral, this quote from the book of Genesis, "They said one to another, behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams." What would Dr. King think about the times we are in? He would state unequivocally, with that beautiful preacher voice of his, and without shame or hesitation, Black Lives Matter. He would also be so saddened at how little we have come as a country. And not the 52 years since his assassination, but the 401 years on this soil we call America. He would lament the white liberal progressive who has been silent far too long. He would commend and be so proud of the protesters in the streets who show the power of nonviolence while showing personal courage and truly putting themselves on the line with body and soul. He would quote his own principles of nonviolence when describing these street warriors of today. Nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, while trying to understand even the looters. Dr. King said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." What has America failed to hear? It has failed to understand institutionalized racism runs throughout many professions. We all know many wonderful police officers, but we also know we have an issue with how law enforcement is clouded by instances of police brutality, silence amongst the fellow officers, and a lack of trust in so many communities of color. We need to examine why this is occurring still in 2020 and hope change is coming because of the courage of the people in the streets today. Again, we're not talking about the 50s and 60s. We are talking about 2020. What I'm speaking extends far beyond what happened to Sir George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, who's not mentioned enough because black women need to be heard as well. and too many others whose lives were taken much too soon at the hands of brutality and racism. And again, in 2020, a dear friend of mine told me yesterday, I was speaking to him, and I was so troubled about what President Trump was going to do. He's doing a rally. It was supposed to be June 19th. He switched it to June 20th. It's his first rally since the pandemic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the site of terrible murders of African-American bankers and many other African-Americans who were thriving in what was called the Black Wall Street in 1921 in Tulsa. And Trump was going to speak on Juneteenth, the official end of slavery. My friend said to me, when I heard what President Trump is doing, what city he's doing it in, what date he's doing it on as an African-American, I felt stabbed in the back and I felt stabbed in the heart. Can any one of us imagine and understand his pain, his real pain of why he feels stabbed in his heart and back at the same time? It is time, in my opinion, for white people to understand their privilege and do something about it. Silence is not okay anymore. We all need to be part of this discussion, and more than that, part of the solution. I've heard from many of my white friends who say oftentimes, I didn't enslave anyone. I was too young during the civil rights movement. I have a black friend. Well, truth be told, a 17-year-old German student in Germany is not responsible for the Holocaust. I say this as a Jewish person, but they need to know about it. They need to understand how it happened. They need to be part of the solution, and they damn well sure need to make sure it never happens again. The same messages are true for white people today, and it begins with people becoming self-educated. I recommend Robin DiAngelo, if you don't know who she is, her book, it's called White Fragility. I recommend it to everyone, and after you read that book, I challenge you, you will not think the same way, and thinking is a form of nonviolent protest. We need as white people to make the commitment not ever to be a silent witness when we see injustice. We must speak out so people know they don't stand alone, that we are also here for each other and literally look at each other as brothers and sisters, because that is truly who we are. I was on CNN a number of years ago with one of the Little Rock Nine. Her name is Minnie Jean Brown Trickey. Minnie Jean is the first black student to desegregate schools in the South in 1957 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And Minnie Jean was asked by the commentator on CNN, do you get upset that people don't know who you are? They may have heard of the Little Rock Nine, but most people don't know who Minnie Jean is, partly because she's not in any history books. Minnie Jean gave the definitive answer when she said, if people don't know who I am, it's not their fault. It means we haven't taught them. So we have a lot of learning to do, and it begins at home, and it begins with us individually. Now is the time, not tomorrow, not next week, but now. I opened my remarks by sharing a quote that was said at Dr. King's funeral. One more time. They said one to another, behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him. We shall see what becomes of his dreams. I ask all of you today, what will become of Dr. King's dreams? What role do you play? What role do we all play in bringing what Dr. King called the beloved community? Thank you.
My name is Herman. I'm 19, and today I asked to speak to you as your neighbor. And what a difficult subject we have in front of ourselves today. What difficult discussions we've been having as a community in our households. What difficult discussions we've been having as a nation. The tragedy of it all is that race is, first and foremost, a man-made, artificial thing none of us consented to. None of us bargained for it, and none of us alive here wanted it to start. Yet, the ideas of racism are so rooted in the way that we think of ourselves that sometimes we take for granted just how rotten a deal we received. We see it so often that we accept it passively, race and all its consequences. We become like a person standing too close to the proverbial elephant. Give me a moment. As the saying goes, if you stand too close to an elephant, you won't actually know what you're looking at. And we've all been standing much too close. And too few of us have actually been forced to stand back and look at what is staring back at us. As we too often forget, the road downwards is often paved with good intent. And all of us have been walking down an all too familiar road. And that is why millions across our nation choose to say those names and march, so that we can all stand back and marvel at what is right in front of us. My apologies. When talking about racial injustice, specifically with the police force, I often hear people talk about the idea of justice and what justice is. I'm guessing you've heard the logic along these lines, that laws are only laws if they are enforceable, and to make enforceable laws requires accepting that use of sometimes lethal force is necessary. And two, that because racial bias is so common in our society, you cannot expect anyone, including the police or the state, to be held to a higher standard. The conclusion from this logic is something that I hope we can all at least quietly admit is more than a little upsetting. You get the idea that frequent violence against Black people by the state is a justifiable consequence. A justifiable consequence of the society we were given at birth and society that we have, by virtue of our silence, continued choosing to be. And that should give every single one of us a moment of pause. And I refuse to believe that when I appeal to any person's better angels, a person equally placed into an imperfect world, but also striving to leave it better off, that they won't come to believe that we can just passively accept this. After all, that is the power of the words Black Lives Matter, and why millions have found safety under that banner. Because it doesn't reduce any person or any death into a justifiable consequence. Instead, Black Lives Matter is a moonshot call out into the wind that at minimum, the people who died were people who meant something to someone. And because that human being meant something to a mother, a father, a sibling, or a friend, at minimum, we should at least try for reform. If we want to talk about justice, this seems a lot closer to justice than anything we've seen before. Thank you.
You can never be too safe. Hi, everyone. First off, my name is Stephanie Wong, and I want to make one thing very, very clear. I am not Black. I do not speak for the Black community. I also do not speak for the entirety of the Asian American community, although I am a member. I am only an ally, and today, our role as allies is to amplify Black voices. And so today, I want to read you a piece by Cameron Welch. These are the unwritten rules Black mothers have for their sons. 大家好，我今日想要同大家分享 Cameron Welch 喺網上邊寫嘅一篇文章。佢係一位非洲裔男性，佢嘅媽咪叫佢出街要跟以下呢啲規條，希望可以保障佢平安。Rule 1:
Don't touch anything you're not buying. 第一，如果你唔係買嗰樣嘢，咁你唔好掂。Rule 2. Never leave the store without a receipt or a bag, even if it's just a pack of gum. 第二，每次買完嘢一定要有手具同埋貨品要有膠袋袋住。Rule 3. Don't stare at a Caucasian woman. 第三，唔好定眼望住一個白人女性。Rule 4. If a cop stops you and starts randomly questioning you, don't talk back. You need to compromise. 第四，如果有一個警察鐵截停你，同埋開始問你問題，你唔好同佢駁嘴，你就係聽佢話。Can you imagine your son's life being dependent on whether he follows these rules? Can you imagine your daughter being mistaken for a criminal and being accidentally and fatally shot for not carrying a receipt? I only read to you 4 rules. Cameron Welch gave me a list of 16. But even if you followed these 16 rules, your life is not guaranteed. This is the reality for Black men and women. 我哋能唔能夠想像，如果你哋啲仔女唔守呢啲規條，可能會冇咗條命？其實阿 Welch 嘅媽咪吩咐佢要守16條規條，唔係就係嗰啲4條規條我啱啱頭先講咗，係16條。我哋有冇印象？如果跟晒呢啲16條規條，都可能會冇命。We say all lives matter, but do we really mean it? If all lives mattered, then why are Black children subject to these rules but not children of other races? If all lives matter, why was Ahmaud Arbery murdered for jogging, Breonna Taylor shot dead in her own home for sleeping, and even 12-year-old Tamir Rice killed for playing with a toy gun? We can't. And in order to start showing that all lives matter, we need to start advocating for actions that place Black lives on equal footing to any other life. When it comes to the Asian American community, we need to start addressing the trauma that has been inflicted on us by select bad individuals of the Black community, while keeping in mind that this is not reflective of the entire Black community. We need to unify these two communities in particular by saying no to xenophobia and no to racism, because they are one and the same. In order for all lives to matter, we need to start voting for policies that address 400 years of oppression that weigh on the lives of Black men and women. This will come as institutional reform, economic opportunity, and properly educating our children about slavery's transformation from the Mississippi Black Codes to redlining, and now police brutality and the mass incarceration system. And until we do those things, and until we can show that Black lives truly matter, then all lives matter will only remain a saying and not a truth. Thank you.
Thank you all for your powerful, powerful words. I think we all have a lot that we can think about and how we can take our own actions to make change and stop systemic racism. So at this time, I would like to invite our city council members to come up front, and I want to hand the microphone over to Amy Lauer, who will lead us through the kneeling ceremony.
Hello, everyone.
My name is Amy Kelly Lauer, and I've lived in Millbrae with my family, 4 kids, 1 husband, 3 cats, since 2012. So thank you very much. An incredibly attentive and quiet audience. So I did think I was going to have to ask you to prepare to be quiet, but you already have been. The speakers we've been listening to have had so many things to say. So this is the portion of our gathering, which is our vigil. Vigil, it actually means to be awake, and I want you all to be very, very awake. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, to the best of our physical abilities, we will kneel. We will kneel and listen. You will listen to 2 young women. Both have either attended or have graduated from Mills. They will read names. It is an incomplete list of names. It is a list of 62 Black Americans who were killed by police violence. And think about how incomplete it was. Actually, just going to indulge myself for 1 minute. We all have phones in our pockets. As my husband says, all the wisdom of the world at our fingertips. It only takes a couple of Google searches for phrases like Black death by police, civil rights death to get these unbelievable lists with incredible biographies of peoples whose lives were cut short. And our experience in life has been cut short accordingly because their contributions have been muted. So with that, we're going to kneel. I'm actually going to stand and say a name and then go kneel. But we are going to kneel. And the first name whom we are going to honor is George Perry Floyd Jr. We are going to kneel in honor, in memory, and also because kneeling is a form of protest against police violence. Thank you very much for being awake.
Sean Monterosa, 22, Vallejo, California, June 5th, 2020. Jamel Floyd, 35, Brooklyn, New York, June 3rd, 2020. Javier Ambler, 40, Austin, Texas, March 28th, 2020. Breonna Taylor, 26, Louisville, Kentucky, March 13th, 2020. Manuel Ellis, 33, Tacoma, Washington, March 3rd, 2020. Ahmaud Arbery, 25, Brunswick, Georgia, February 23rd, 2020. Tatiana Jefferson, 28, Fort Worth, Texas, 2019. Eric Reason, 38, Vallejo, California, 2019. Dominique Lucy Clayton, 32, Oxford, Mississippi, 2019. Botham John, 26, Dallas, Texas, 2018. Chinedu Okobi, 36, Millbrae, California, 2018. Charlena Siobhan Lyles, 30, Seattle, Washington, 2017. Philando Castile, 32, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 2016. Delron Small, 37, Cypress Hills, New York, 2016. Alton Sterling, 37, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 2016. Corinne Gaines, 23, Randallstown, Maryland, 2016. Tanisha Anderson, 37, Cleveland, Ohio, 2015. Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., 25, Baltimore, Maryland, 2015. Sandra Bland, 28, Waller County, Texas, 2015. Betty Jones, 55, Chicago, Illinois, 2015. Walter Scott, 50, North Charleston, South Carolina, 2015. Megan Hockaday, 26, Oxnard, California, 2015. Maya Hall, 27, Baltimore, Maryland, 2015. Alexia Christian, 26, Atlanta, Georgia, 2015. Easel Ford, 25, Los Angeles, California, 2014. Tamir Rice, 12, Cleveland, Ohio, 2014. Michael Brown, 18, Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. Eric Garner, 27, Staten Island, New York, 2014. Errol Chang, 34, Pacifica, California, 2014. Yvette Smith, 47, Bastrop County, Texas, 2014. Gabriela Navarez, 22, Citrus Heights, California, 2014.
Pearly Miss Sully Golden, 93, Hearn, Texas, 2014. Michelle Suso, 24, Phoenix, Arizona, 2014. Shinekyu Proctor, 18, Bessemer, Alabama, 2014. Aura Rosser, 40, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 2014. Tanisha Anderson, 37, Cleveland, Ohio, 2014. Kiam Livingstone, 37, Brooklyn, New York, 2013. Miriam Carey, 34, Washington, D.C., 2013. Kayla Moore, 41, Berkeley, California, 2013. Trayvon Martin, 17, Sanford, Florida, 2012. Shelley Frey, 27, Houston, Texas, 2012. Melissa Williams, 30, Cleveland, Ohio, 2012. Alicia Thompson, 35, Los Angeles, California, 2012. Chantel Davis, 23, Brooklyn, New York, 2012. Charmel Edwards, 49, Las Vegas, Nevada, 2012. Reka Boy, 22, Chicago, Illinois, 2012. Charisse Francis, 30, New York, New York, 2012. Ayana Stanley Jones, 7, Detroit, Michigan, 2010. Tarika Wilson, 26, Lima, Ohio, 2008. Katherine Johnston, 92, Atlanta, Georgia, 2006. Alberta Spruill, 57, Harlem, New York, 2003. Kendra James, 21, Portland, Oregon, 2003. Latanya Haggerty, 26, Chicago, Illinois, 1999. Margaret Laverne, 55, Los Angeles, California, 1999. Amado Diallo, 23, Bronx, New York, 1999. Tisha Miller, 19, Riverside, California, 1998. Danette Daniels, 31, Newark, New Jersey, 1997. Frankie Ann Perkins, 37, Chicago, Illinois, 1997. Sanji Taylor, 27, Los Angeles, California, 1993. Eleanor Bumpers, 66, Bronx, New York, 1984. George Stinney Jr., 14, South Carolina State Penitentiary, 1944, and many, many more.
8 minutes and 46 seconds. You can all stand up. That is a long time. And I'm sorry if some of you were uncomfortable to have to kneel during that entire time, but isn't that the point? Think of how George Floyd must have felt under the knee of an officer for that same period of time. So I do want everyone to take a moment and reflect on the names that we just heard. Every single one of those names was a person who was a son or a daughter, a brother or a sister, and a friend. Some may have been a mother or father themselves, and they were a coworker or a neighbor. The list is only a partial list, as there are hundreds more. Racism exists in every corner of our country, including our little town of Millbrae. Chinedu Okobi was tased to death just a few blocks away. And while I have respect for our officers, it is clear that policing policies need to change. But fighting racism starts with us. We must do better as a people and as a nation, and it's time for us to step up and become anti-racist and to say enough is enough. And for all who say that all lives matter, they do. But nothing is more pressing or urgent than Black Lives Matter, because we cannot have peace or claim to have justice in this country until Black Lives Matter. This is a human issue, no matter what race you are. This is about all races coming together as allies and our community uniting as humans to take a stand and make our voices heard, to say that all racism is wrong and that we should all have a right to live freely without fear in this world. So I want you to take a look around. Look at your neighbors. Look at this incredible diversity and cherish the solidarity of this moment and this community. Hashtag making Millbrae proud. I want you all to remember the unity of our community, because collectively we stand together with our Black brothers and sisters to say that Black lives matter. And with that, I will hand it over to Oded again, followed up by some closing comments from Steve Henderson.
Thank you, Karen, and thank all of you again. I think we are witnessing a historic change, but we will be no less dramatic than what we saw in the 1960s. Millions of Americans are starting to show solidarity for all people of color, and especially for Black. We have the power to turn this into a real grassroots movement that will lead to greater freedom and equality. I am proud that Millbrae took a step towards achieving this goal today. Thank you all for coming. Give yourself a hand. This vigil has been a success. We have made ourselves heard, but it doesn't end here. We are ending this vigil, but the effort to fight racism is still far from over. And for many of us, me included, it has only just begun. Like many of us in the organizing committee, I feel that in the last couple of weeks I have changed from a non-racist to an anti-racist. For me, this means that while I have tried to treat everyone as equal, no matter their origin, nationality, gender, or religion, I have done so privately. I have not acted out on injustices, and I have not publicly expressed my disgust from a state of affairs in which the greatest nation on earth still carries with it vestiges of its racist past over 150 years after the abolition of slavery. But now, I realize that I and we all must act. Whenever we see injustice, locally or federally or in any place, we should not remain silent. And today, again, is the beginning. I want to thank you all again for coming. We're really making a change. I will invite Steve Henderson to give some closing remarks, and after that, we will have an open mic for whoever feels that they have an experience they want to share or emotions and feelings they want to share with us. You're welcome to do so. And lastly, if you can, please help our local businesses by having a late lunch at one of the downtown restaurants that have been hit hard and need our help. Thanks again.
All right. Many Americans in recent weeks have been asking themselves, what can I do about race? How can I make a difference? This is all too much. Somebody else will surely do something about it. Well, here we are, the difference makers. Let's accept, though, that race is a social construct. By that I mean, at a biological level, there's very little difference between us being human. For centuries, our apparent physical differences have been exploited for the convenience of those in power, mostly for labor. Africans during slavery, Chinese to build the Transcontinental Railroad, Latinx to people to harvest the crops throughout our lush California valleys. We've been conditioned to believe that some people are just worth less. For decades, separate but equal laws permeated our existence. Today, redlining and voter suppression keep certain kinds of people in their place. Deep down inside, we know that it's really not true that there are actually people that are inherently worth less. The shocking events of recent weeks have got us all thinking and acting. As citizens in a democracy, we must stand for each other. It is our right and our responsibility to hold ourselves, our elected officials, and our police force accountable. We must participate in elections and, when necessary, hold peaceful demonstrations to demand justice. Hopelessness is the ally of injustice. There are some who will talk themselves out of doing anything before taking the first step. You have done more than that. Again, here we are, exercising our rights for right. Our actions are justified. Inaction is not. Inaction would mean that 10 or 20 years from now, our children, either here or in some other place, will be protesting for the same thing, our protections of the Constitution. So we're going to defeat racism and police brutality. We are going to win. We will win as we work for change by educating ourselves about systemic racism and police brutality, as we remain open and aware of the uncomfortable feelings that are part of facing these realities. We will win as we initiate conversations with our various audiences and have the moral courage to take small steps regularly to be a part of groups that meet the standards of inclusivity and equity. We will win as we network with each other, the stakeholders in our community. We must set new norms that are anti-racist, that demand accountability from elected officials, educators, and our community of police. So in many ways, this Black Lives Matter protest standing up to systemic racism and police brutality punctuates the beginning of a journey for us, a change towards better, a willingness to admit that while comfort has its place, in many ways, comfort is the enemy of meaningful progress. Together, we must work for change, we must initiate conversations, and we must network with one another. Together, we can and we will win. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here. Just some follow-up reminders. Sorry, but the County Health Department does recommend that if you attend a protest, that you get tested if you start showing any symptoms of COVID between 2 and 14 days after attending a protest, and there are free tests available in San Mateo, Redwood City, and Half Moon Bay. And if you have any questions regarding this, please see Ann Schneider if you want to stand up. Projectbaseline.org. .com, sorry. And from here on out, I will open up the mic for anybody who wants to share their own personal stories or wants to keep the discussion going. The mic will be open, but will officially close at 2:30. You can line up here on the ramp to the podium. Please remember to socially distance and be respectful. And if you could keep your comments to about 2 minutes per person, that would be wonderful. That ends the formal portion. Thank you, everybody.
Hello. I am not the right person to give a platform to at a Black Lives Matter demonstration, so I'll be incredibly brief. I want to address the young Millbrae citizens here today that are not Black. I grew up in Millbrae. I went to Spring Valley Elementary and Taylor Middle and Mills High. I am certain that all of you were raised to think about the police the same way that I was, that they're the good guys, they're the heroes, they're here to help you, and you should trust them. I am not asking you to abandon that mindset, but I am asking you to understand that that mindset is valid for you because of your race. There has been plenty of hate thrown at the Black Lives Matter protesters based on the argument that the proudest Americans uphold our American ideals. What they are saying is that true Americans should stick to the status quo, ignoring the fact that everything that makes America great was built on protest. Let me make something very clear. The proudest Americans protest. The proudest Americans research their country's history beyond what is taught in schools, including the racist foundation of the police. The proudest Americans hold their country accountable to protect and honor and cherish the lives and the dignities of all of its citizens. They do this by having those awkward conversations with their parents and friends, by contacting local officials, by developing their own opinions. The proudest Americans understand that the systems in place can and must evolve. The institutions created by white men hundreds of years ago should not be more sacred than the Black lives that exist today in spite of those institutions. I'm so grateful that I've learned all of this thanks to the Black people who are brave enough to keep fighting, and I've continued to learn over the last few weeks. I hope you all listen to Black peers, acknowledge your privilege, and then use your privilege for good. It is your duty as an American. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Elijah Bradford. I'm actually not a resident of Millbrae. I was born and raised in Castro Valley, California. Fun fact, Castro Valley, California, its history is rooted on being a harbor for hate and KKK rallies and neo-Nazis, but I'm proud to say that as I grew up, my beloved town started to transform into a place where people of all nationalities, all religions were seen as people and were respected. So Castro Valley is doing better to this day because of the changes that men and women like you took to change that process. You know, a few years ago, a man that is well known named Colin Kaepernick, his form of protest was to kneel during the national anthem to show solidarity to all the African Americans, men and women, who were subject to police brutality. Back then, that was met with a lot of resistance and hate, but you can see today that we see that there is a need to protest and to petition the government however we can to show them that Black lives truly do matter. Many people felt that this was disrespectful to the American flag and to our veterans. But I'll share a story with you. My great-grandfather, who is still alive today, is a veteran of the United States Army and served during World War II. Now, for white Americans who are veterans of the Army, Navy, and Marines that came back after World War II were met with much celebration and much respect from their community. But men like my great-grandfather, when they came back, were called the N-word, were called boy, and were still not given respect despite the sacrifice that they made for this country and for all who live within it. I say to you today, as a young Black man who is 18 years old, I am proud that this country has come to a point to where we are starting to acknowledge that the issues that are deeply rooted in this country need to change. I will actually be following in my great-grandfather's footsteps, and as many of my family members have, I will be joining the United States Air Force very shortly. I'm enlisting on Tuesday. I made this decision because it is my firm belief that if African Americans are going to be seen as equal, we need to show this country and we need to show this world that we excel in everything we do. I believe that there needs to be more Black doctors, more Black lawyers, more Black service members, more Black people in politics. I believe that the more Black people that fill these roles, the more we will be seen as equal, and that just like everybody else in this country, we're simply trying to do the best we can and live our lives in peace. I was really encouraged and inspired by the different speakers that spoke today, and I too believe in that dream that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke years ago, and I believe that if we continue to petition our government, if we continue to meet like we have met today, and we continue to do our part as citizens to show this country and show this world that we are not going away, we will not be silent, and we will not go away until there is true justice and change for all Americans, regardless of color, race, or creed. I believe that one day that dream will be met. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is, most of you guys don't know me. My name is Sonia Mahajan, and I'm not from here. I'm from the downtown area of San Jose, and I want to talk about the racism in our own area. So I come from a place of immense privilege. I have light skin, and I'm a South Asian person. Many people call me, like, oh, you look so, like, white for an Indian person, and I've received immense privilege because of that. And I want to talk about the racism in our own community. I grew up in a mainly Asian and South Asian area, but I heard kids say the N-word every single day. I heard kids say the N-word every single day. It's good? Oh. I heard kids say the N-word every single day, and I had let it slide because I was too afraid. I was too afraid of being like that person. But now I'm starting to realize, after going to these protests, that it's not just about us. It is about what we do to our community. It's about what we do to our community, and I encourage all of you, no matter what race you are, to report such injustices that occur. People that tend to say the N-word don't, once you report them, or once you call them out on it, they won't do anything. But once you actually report them, and once you realize the consequences for their own action, they start to change. And I encourage all of you guys to do that.
I'm just going to get straight into it. How many of you knew who Chinedu Okobi was before today? Raise your hands. That is not very many, and it is not enough. Chinedu Okobi was a 36-year-old man, a son of Nigerian immigrants, and a father himself. He was a poet, he was a college graduate, and he was murdered by 4 San Mateo County cops, tased to death, and beaten on October 3rd, 2018. Those cops are still on the force. They have not been fired. So when the speaker here earlier said to take action, where was his action when his own citizen was murdered by those cops? And why does it take a 13-year-old white girl to tell you this? When we talk about Black Lives Matter, why didn't Chinedu's life matter? And when we talk about Black Lives Matter, do we realize that it is not just in Kentucky, it is not just in Georgia, and it is not just in Minnesota, it is 2 damn blocks away. Change, if you feel uncomfortable right now, that is good, because change cannot happen unless you feel uncomfortable. Change cannot happen from your couch. So do more and do better. Thank you.
This month is Pride Month, and this week, 2 Black trans women were murdered, Dominique Fells and Rhea Minton. The average life expectancy for Black trans people in this country is 35 years old. Black trans lives matter, and don't forget that when you say Black Lives Matter.
The young lady said what I meant to say. 2 blocks away from here, somebody was murdered in Millbrae, California, this little town. And I want you all to remember, when it's time to vote, that Carlos Bolanos is still the sheriff. And it was under his watch that this mentally ill man was murdered. I want you to remember that Steve Wagstaff is the district attorney, and when it's time to vote, remember that murder happened in this town and nobody was held accountable. And I want you to remember, when it's time to vote, that the Millbrae City Council kept the sheriff's department on after somebody was murdered in Millbrae and nobody was held accountable. I want you to remember to vote. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. Please stay safe.